Hey guys, back here again at the table with myself and Amy Plano. And the last topic we talked about was post-workout nutrition. So what we're going to talk about today is pre-workout. And I think the major questions are, when should you eat? What should you eat based off what type of workout? So I think we can start those two basic questions.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
So in terms of, let's do the when. And
Yeah.
so really in terms of the when, it really depends when you actually are working out. And so I kind of think about when people work out in kind of two pieces. They either work out really early in the morning, so they're like the 5:30 or they're the 6:30, or I kind of consider anything else that kind of after that time, kind of like a normal period where you could get in a decent amount of food. And so let's talk about the morning first. And so the morning, if you are like a super early morning exerciser and you're here around those time periods, what's important to think about is in terms of what you're able to eat. So like, do you have an appetite at that time in the morning? And if you do, then the goal would be, number one, with any of these pre-workout nutritions, always to hydrate, okay? I think we immediately want to think about, supplements. We immediately want to think about what kind of food. But when you wake up in the morning, if you think about it, you probably, you could be fasting from anywhere from 6 to 10 hours, depending upon when your last meal was. So hydration is going to be a big piece. And we know when we look at hydration that a decrease in body weight of 1 to 2% can compromise performance anywhere from 10 to 15%. So hydration first thing in the morning would be important. And I would say to you, so if you have a hard time drinking a ton of water before you come, what I might say to you is maybe put some water out by your nightstand, so you're kind of drinking throughout the night, because you don't want it sloshing around in your stomach. If you also are a morning workouter and you don't have an appetite, what I might suggest is doing some type of quick acting carbohydrate. So when we work out in the afternoon, we're going to talk about slow digesting carbohydrates. First thing in the morning, because you're so pressed for time, you want to try to drive that insulin levels up and you want to get some protein in. If you jump into your workout like many people do with no protein and no carbohydrates, the body has no other choice but to burn its own stores as fuel. So it's going to burn muscle as fuel. It just doesn't really have that many options. So what I would say to you is even something on the way here like a banana, some dried fruit, something that's going to be pretty quick acting that your body can digest in a short period of time.
So you don't think working out in a fasted state first thing in the morning is good?
I think it depends what your goals are. You know what I mean? And I think when we look at some of the workouts here, they tend to be shorter in duration. And so, so when you look at the studies in terms of working out fasted, my understanding is that it really has to be like really low intensity in order to burn fat as fuel. You know what I mean? When they look at kind of the substrates that they oxidize. So that's my only kind of concern with that. If somebody were to work out fasted, then what I might say to that is then definitely do some branch chains.
So working out fasted is more like, okay, I'm going to wake up and go for a 60-minute light jog.
Absolutely.
So
very low. And my understanding too, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it really has to be like a heart rate under like 120 or 130.
Yeah,
in that fasted state,
it's like state, yeah.
It's like very, very, like bodybuilders walk on a treadmill at an incline of 3% at like 2 miles an hour.
Fat. Okay, so you're coming in, you're hitting weights, you're doing intense work. You should have something in your body so you don't burn away the muscle.
Absolutely.
And is everybody's gut different? So can some people manage a little bit more food, some people can't? Like, what if people come in and they eat a little bit, but then they feel like they're going to throw up just from having food in their stomach?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would say with that, to answer that question, go with something more liquid-based, And even if you're working out first thing in the morning and you can't stomach like a protein shake with whey, in a banana or something in there, then I would say even during your workout, if you bring that with you and you start to try to sip on it, very slowly, it shouldn't necessarily upset your stomach. If it does, one of the things you want to manipulate, if you find that what you're eating before is causing you to have, to feel sluggish, two things you want to look at is how much fiber are you taking in that pre-workout meal, and then how much fat, because those are going to digest slower, and then those are going to kind of sit in your stomach almost like a lead bomb. So that's why something like the whey in something like a banana or some of the quick digesting foods, they're going to move very quickly through your system. But, like anything, there's some people that can't stomach anything. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what I come up with for them to try. So in those scenarios where people can't tolerate anything before they work out, I probably would say to go something with like 1.5 scoops of branch chains. So branch chain amino acids, just to make sure that your body is more in anabolic mode, just to make sure that it's going to be, kind of in protein synthesis versus breakdown mode. So, you can get branch chains anywhere, Vitamin Shop, online, and it's just good to throw a scoop of that in your water, especially if you're not going to be having anything before you work out.
Right. Cool. All right, so now let's go to your workout, let's say the 8 to 9 or 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. What should you be thinking about for pre-workout? And how long before you work out should you be eating?
Absolutely. And so in those scenarios, we usually say the goal would be 30 to 60 minutes before that. Okay, but once again, it's always going to depend. We have to look at the big picture. It's like, what did you eat for the rest of the day? And so with that time frame that you're referring to, we would often say, like, what did the meal look like that before you're going to train? And so why I say that is that if you had a balanced lunch or, balanced breakfast with slow digesting carbs and some protein, that's still going to be circulating in your blood system. So you really don't need to have, there's really not as big of a stress in those time scenarios to get something pre-workout. But, in a perfect world, with all things being said, I still would try to get some type of protein, even if it's just 20 to 30 grams prior to directly working out in that 30-minute window, because they show that even just 20 grams of protein can also help prevent the breakdown of protein while you're working out. So, time frame, you're really looking to answer your question, so probably 30 to 60 minutes pre. Also, you want to assess, what did you eat before then? You know what I mean? So if you had a grilled chicken salad and you had no carbs, yeah, you definitely want to pile drive those carbs, prior to working out. But it's always going to refer back to the meal before. So the same thing with working out in the morning. What did you eat for dinner? So if you're working out in the afternoon, like, what did your lunch look like? Did you just have a snack? So, you have to be cognizant of that too. And we can't just, one of the things we tend to do is we look at pre, peri, and post nutrition in isolation. And we really can't do that, especially if somebody's goal is for weight loss. Like or body fat composition, we have to look at the whole day and then distribute based around what that, based around what the intensity and the duration looks like.
So what if you to say, okay, here are 3 things you should think about with food?
Yes.
Because people don't want, okay, what kind of protein, what kind of carb, like, what would be a suggestion?
Okay, so so in the primo, so if you're say you're an afternoon exerciser, you know what I mean? What I like to see is something that's like a slow digesting carb that doesn't paired with a protein that doesn't have a lot of fat. So that might be like oatmeal with like a cup of scrambled egg whites in it. That might be a whey shake, with some frozen fruit in it. That might be like a wrap with some egg whites, maybe 1 egg. English muffin and cottage cheese.
Yes, you're pretty much looking at protein and carbs.
And the key thing there is we're looking at protein and carbs, but we also have to make sure we don't have a ton of fiber and a ton of fat. So that's why I'm a huge fan of regular eggs. I'm a huge fan of bacon, but I wouldn't recommend it kind of pre-workout, only because it's going to slow everything down and it has the potential to make people sick.
Yeah, and something I look at too with, let's say our competitors, people work out a little more aggressively.
Yeah.
Is that I think, does it also look at the type of workout you're doing? So the predominant fuel source for anaerobic is carbs.
Sure.
So you have to make sure you're eating enough carbs, make sure you're fueling your body for that. Do you also look at, let's say, the time that it takes your body to digest? So let's say you're an athlete and you're going into a big competition. Do you generally want to eat like 2 hours before? That way your body's like done digesting and all it needs to do is just shut down to work out hard.
Sure.
It doesn't have to worry about anything else. You think about that too?
Yeah, we do. And we also have to look at like Jay's saying, like the type of exercise. Is it aerobic versus anaerobic? And that when we go into a workout, what we tend to forget is that if we eat something, it's still going to peak. And so if we're digesting protein, while it's absorbed at 30 minutes, it's going to peak at 60 to 90 minutes. And so it's still going to be in the bloodstream. And so once again, it's such a personal preference. I used to do triathlons. There used to be guys eating cheeseburgers like on the bike. It really depends how your body digests those things. But if you're an athlete and you're a competitive athlete, probably the most important thing that you can do is kind of pulse those meals. And so like you're saying is giving yourself enough time so the body has enough kind of resources to devote to your muscles. What happens if you go in and you're an athlete, today's a competition, and you go in and you have a pretty high carb meal right before you train, so let's talk like bagels and things with jellies and jams. What happens is blood sugar goes really, really high, and then you generally will crash pretty quickly. Because the bigger the rise with the carbs, the harder the fall. So that's why we generally don't like athletes to have a big, huge carbohydrate-laden meal, like 30 minutes before.
Yeah.
Because we have reactive hypoglycemia, so it's great to, if you can, in a perfect world, we want to make sure that we space out that. So I would say 90 to 2 hours before is when you want to get that biggest meal in. And just being mindful of that, you know what I mean? I think just like with anything, you have to plan that out, and I don't think that most people do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else you want to add in?
No. I think next week we'll talk about supplements maybe. We'll talk about caffeine. We'll talk about some more about branched chains, and then we will chat about some creatine. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Caffeine.